Thank you very much, Ji. I thank the Asma Jahangir Foundation, Supreme Court Bar, Pakistan Bar Council, Ehsan Boon Saab, Tar Saab, and all the distinguished guests, panelists. A very good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. The topic that I would be speaking on is accountability, and when we talk about accountability, it would be appropriate for us to trace the history of this accountability process. And if we go into the recent past, we see that we had the Ihtisab Act 97. We saw that the then political opposition complained of being victimized by that Ihtisab Act. Then we saw the Musharraf era, where we were introduced with the National Accountability Ordinance, and now we have the National Accountability Bureau as a result of that ordinance. And again we saw that the then political opposition was victimized. And later on, post 18th Amendment, we saw a vacuum. We saw a silence on part of the Accountability Bureau, and that vacuum seems to have been filled by the suo motu jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. We saw 2 chairmen, NAB, being sent home. And then in the recent past, we again see the political opposition complaining of the accountability process being used as a tool for victimization. One thing which comes out in my understanding as something which is common, that corruption is an issue, and everyone agrees with it that this is an issue. The only problem seems to be the way this issue is addressed. The problem seems to be in using the National Accountability Bureau as a tool by every incumbent government, every government using it for accountability of others, not their own. And that is where the issue lies, in my opinion. In my opinion, when we talk about the process of accountability, it has to be objective. It has to be something which should be seen to be fair. It should be something which should be seen to be across the board. But that, unfortunately, is not what we see in reality. Unfortunately, we see the Accountability Bureau also realizing its importance as a tool for victimization. They perhaps have appreciated the fact that every government needs us. Perhaps every government cannot operate against its political opposition without us. There are numerous examples which I believe nobody needs to repeat. Recently, we also saw the Honorable Supreme Court giving observations to this effect. This is not my view as a lawyer. This is the observation of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, observing recently while granting bail to Khaja Saad Rafiq Saab and Khaja Salman Rafiq Saab. And the Supreme Court observed that the National Accountability Bureau is exercising unfettered powers, misusing its authority, ignoring the constitutional freedoms of the people and their liberty, and being used as a tool for victimization, and they also use the word political engineering. But interestingly, the reference in which this order was being passed was not quashed. Bail was granted, but the observations of such a scathing nature were termed as tentative. And now comes the other aspect, inaction on part of the legislature. What did the legislature do to hold the Accountability Bureau accountable in light of such observations? And I believe it's the inaction on part of the legislature in the recent past that has led to that vacuum, and that has led to that lack of debate on regulating the accountability process. The debate is now unfortunately shifting towards victimization because regulation of the accountability process has not been put to the real debate. Every institution needs to be independent, but independence should not be unfettered. Independence has to be regulated. Regulation should come from the legislature. Till date, approximately 22 years have passed. We don't have any rules and regulations regarding the Accountability Bureau. The chairman has vast powers to arrest, to detain. We know The FIA cannot arrest in inquiry. We know the anti-corruption department will not arrest during an inquiry, but we don't know whether NAP will arrest during a complaint verification, or will arrest during an inquiry, or will it arrest during an investigation. Whimsical, arbitrary exercise of power is the issue. That needs to be regulated if you want to get rid of this victimization process. You don't need to get rid of the accountability process. You don't need to get rid of the accountability laws. You need to regulate the laws. You need to hold them accountable for their excesses. You need to legislate in a manner which allows the institutional regulation should be focused on not curbing the independence of an institution, but regulating the institution under the rule of law. And that is what the only place where this can be done in an objective manner is the legislature. It is the job of the legislature, and unfortunately, the recent history has been when some amendments have been introduced, they have been person-specific, alleged to be. And recently, I think the second and the third amendment ordinances of 21 need to be and deserve to be mentioned. Blatant person-specific ordinances, legislation, bypassing the legislature. The incumbent government wants the chairman to continue, the prosecutor general to continue, but they don't want to legislate and regulate their powers. They don't want to regulate their powers to arrest, detain, form a reference. Keeping this in mind, I believe the vacuum should not be filled by the Honorable Supreme Court or the High Courts. They should be interpreting what the legislature intends, what the legislature intends to do, and that should be interpreted through the judgments, and that is how, in the long run, there may be a possibility for regulating the accountability process without any complaints of victimization. Every accused person claims to be a victim. Every accused person will complain. But when you focus on the rule of law, rather than political engineering, rather than forcing people to change their loyalties, rather than using the accountability process as a threat, I believe the legislature's inaction can also be, in my humble view, attributed to this threat. That the legislators are also subjected to this one-sided, lopsided accountability. The moment they advance towards any legislative bill introducing any regulatory process, I believe they are also threatened by the same bureau that, you know what, there is a file, there is a reference, there is a complaint. I believe that rules and regulations regulating the Accountability Bureau are an hour of the need of the hour. I believe that the legislature has to come to this, because all of them have been a victim in one era or the other. I believe there has to be some consensus on how to legislate on this important issue. And I, again, emphasize that the debate should not move towards getting rid of accountability. The debate should move towards regulating accountability laws and regulating those institutions which are all empowered to hold everyone accountable. For example, it is in the interest of public when you talk about cheating public at large. It is in the interest of public when they feel that comfort that, yes, if I am cheated by someone or if we all are cheated by somebody, then we have some recourse to justice. But when you talk about misuse of authority, when you talk about the offense of asset beyond means, you see they are used in a very biased and partisan way. Any bureaucrat, any officer who has to do his job feels threatened. His ability to serve the state is under threat when he thinks about the magnitude of a project or the governmental body which he's heading. He feels threatened that, you know what, if I sign this file, I will be subjected to this victimization in the future. I won't do it, somebody else needs to do it. So the impact of this lopsided, arbitrary, whimsical exercise of power. The real victim seems to be the state. The real victim seems to be the state, and that is the reason why I urge, we have two eminent legislators already in the panel, and I would urge them to reach a consensus on regulating this accountability process rather than getting rid of this accountability process, and I think that is what should be the way forward. I thank you all once again, and it was an honor to be a part of this function and the conference. Thank you very much.